Hello and welcome to the Rattlebox Games podcast, a bi-weekly romp through the fertile fields of the world of tabletop games with your friends at Rattlebox Games. I'm Rob. Today I'm here with
Brendan, and today we're going to be talking about lots of great things. We're going to spend a little time saying what we've been playing. We're going to talk about games that we've bought that we haven't played, what we're calling the Shelf of Shame.
And then let's make some recommendations that come from outside of the world of tabletop games after that.
Sounds good.
And then we'll send you back on your way. Great.
If you hear anything on the show that you'd like to respond to, reach out to us. We're on Twitter at Rattlebox Games. We have an email address, podcast@rattleboxgames.com.
And we're also on Reddit as Rattlebox Games.
Man, you are creative with that handle.
You know, we're nothing if not consistent.
We also do hang around in the Board Game Geek forums.
Mm-hmm.
Although we don't have a guild yet. Maybe we should look into getting a guild.
Yeah, sure.
That'd be great. If you're enjoying this podcast or any of the Rattlebox Games Network podcasts, take a moment to rate us on your favorite podcasting distribution center. The ratings help us rise up in the ranks and be a little easier for people to find.
Actually, if you're enjoying it, go 2 steps further, if you don't mind. On your podcatcher of choice, rate us, review us, and subscribe, because all 3 of those things help other people find the show, and they make the little green shoots of joy in my heart grow that much more. As we do every week, we start things out in sort of an official capacity with our discussion of what we've been playing in the time since we last recorded.
Yeah.
And once again, we're going to do that to set some artificial parameters around that conversation for no other reason than our own amusement and hopefully your amusement.
Mm-hmm.
We always roll a die to set the number of minutes that we will speak for.
All right.
I've got a full set of polyhedrals out in front of us here.
I think we'll do a D6.
Okay. Pretty civilian choice.
Mm-hmm. I'm nothing if not a civilian. Ooh, a 6.
Oh, we got time enough to spare.
For sure. All right, well, why don't we start now?
Okay. This week, in a slight departure from how things have usually gone, we're going to talk about 2 games that Brendan and I have both played together in the intervening days since last we released an episode.
So we played these games at a local game meetup in the Chicagoland area called Toggle Gaming. There are 2 games that I'd like to talk about. The first one is called Grifters. It's from Indie Boards and Cards Publishing, which you may recognize from the box from the Resistance or other games like that. In fact, I think it takes place in the Resistance world.
I'm pretty sure that it does. Yeah, there's some iconography that's shared.
So I'm not really sure what kind of genre this game is. It's like you have a group of criminals that you send them on missions, and you use that to basically get money. The goal is to get money.
I guess it's a hand builder, right? Is that?
Yeah, because one of the things you do is recruit more criminals. It's got this neat timeline progression thing where you play your criminals, and then they're kind of out of play for a couple rounds. Broadly
speaking, for 2 rounds, unless, as with all games like this, something happens, which it often does.
Right. It's extremely interactive. A lot of the cards involve messing with the other players, either rearranging their groups of criminals or stealing their money or both.
Did I win?
Yeah, you did win.
I think I did win.
Yep. I remember figuring out at the end if I'd done something differently, I might have been able to win instead, but I was greedy.
So we played with a third player who had played it before, and he taught us.
Do you think he was holding back a little bit?
No, I don't think he was holding back. I don't think that's in him. But yeah, it's I don't know what's there to say about that game.
Yeah, I thought it was fine. I generally am not super keen on games where the main strategy is going to be direct attack of the other person.
Yeah, you're right. You know, and you've talked about this on Install from Heap that's not your favorite thing.
Right.
I don't mind it, but it did feel, I guess maybe where I was a little dissatisfied is it felt slightly arbitrary.
Yeah, that if you happen to draw the right criminal, because often you're just getting one off the top of the deck, right? You don't get to see what it is, or you get 2 and you get to pick the one you want.
Once again, that's the thing that varies with what card you're playing.
Right. But it was fine. I would play it again.
Yeah, and playing it again, it's another game that would be interesting to play it a couple times, which I'm
Right.
sure is more what they had in mind, even though it's one of these medium-length games.
Mm-hmm. I suspect if you'd played it a few times, though, it would come in under a half an hour.
That's possible, yeah. And at that point, 2 plays is not a big deal.
Sure.
And then the other game we played was Nevermore, which is, not surprisingly, sort of inspired by the poem by Edgar Allan Poe, in so much as it's got things like ravens and swords and magic.
And ladies dying of tuberculosis.
All of it, left and right. And that game, how do we want to describe that one?
My main sentiment on that one is...
So that game has several phases. You start by getting 5 cards, and you keep 2 past 3.
Right.
Then you keep 3 past 2. Then you keep 4 past 1.
Right.
And then you end up with the hand you're going to have at the end. And then there's a set of tokens in the middle, which after the first round are randomized, although in the first round they're in a set order.
Sure.
And you sort of battle out for supremacy during each phase.
And you're generally trying to... So as the cards are passing around, you're kind of picking which phase you want to try to win.
Yeah, you're picking your battle. I don't know. Yeah, it left me a little cold. I mean, we only played it once, and I'm trying to remember who won that one. So we'd played. Who won that game?
I think, was it you again?
Well, you know what? Yes, it was. But I didn't feel like the decisions were that decisive. And maybe this is a game where experienced players, like it's hard to play poker against someone who doesn't know what they're doing because they aren't making rational decisions.
Right.
I feel like I'm an experienced enough gamer that I make rational decisions, but
the nuances of this game, maybe it was hard to figure it out in time to do well the first hand. I also, for some reason, I can't say why, but it really bugged me to keep 2 cards at the beginning of the hand. I don't know why.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would play it again. It sounds like you wouldn't.
No, I don't think I would.
I wonder if that's the difference between winning and losing. The third game we played that night, by the way, was In the Loop. Oh,
And we'll have to talk about that later.
I think we already talked about In the Loop a little.
True enough.
Not this game, of course, or not this recording session, but the last one.
Right. If that sounds unfamiliar, if this is your first time, welcome to the Rattlebox Games podcast. Thanks for listening. Our last episode was called State of the Rattlebox, and we talked about a variety of games we're developing, including the train-themed card-laying hidden role puzzle game In the Loop.
This is true. All right. Well, as with anything that we describe, we then evaluate. And when we're evaluating, we use a scale. And that scale is a D20 scale.
That's right.
I guess first, Grifters, what do you think?
It was fine.
Mm-hmm.
I can see why people like it, and maybe with further plays, I might like it more. So maybe 12? 10?
Okay.
10 to 12, somewhere in there for me.
Yeah, I'm probably right there with you. I'm going to go 11. I didn't mind it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's nothing about it that makes me want to play it again.
Sure.
No offense to the designers.
But
I wouldn't avoid playing it again. If that's what everyone else wanted to play, I'd play it.
Right.
And then Nevermore.
Well,
you guys can't see his face.
Yeah.
He's pulling a face, guys.
Oh boy. See, I can't tell if my dislike of it is fair. Like if the game is actually like, I mean, I guess I'd maybe put it at like an 8.
We're upfront that this is one first play,
right?
As opposed to
I could 8. Mm-hmm. It wasn't broken. I could understand how it worked, so I don't want to give it lower than that.
Yeah,
but I don't think I would want to play it again.
I think I'd go right down the middle. I'm going to go 10. I probably got 2 more points of enjoyment out of it for winning. Although here's the thing about it: as I was walking away, I was talking to the gentleman who we were playing with, whose name eludes me for the moment, and I think this is an example of I'd rather lose a game interestingly than win a game uninterestingly, and I won Nevermore uninterestingly. I came in with a big score at the end. It's sort of in a runaway.
Yeah.
And his superior knowledge of the game, because this is a game he likes, It was no aid to him.
Well, there again, we may have been, we may have been playing badly, and since it's a drafting game where you're passing cards around, if we're not making optimal choices,
I made one outright mistake, but it was such that it was easy to roll back. It had just happened. I don't, once again, like, we're gamers. Like, we know these are not foreign mechanics. There isn't anything particularly unique mechanically about that game. And then what about In the Loop? What do you rate that?
Ooh, solid 20.
There we go. I like it. I'll ride your coattails on that. Okay, well, after we discuss what we've played, then we discuss the topic of the week. And last time we spoke with you good people, we were joined by our friend and collaborator, Marty. And I think it was actually his idea.
Mm-hmm. Figures that he would run for it when we have to talk about it.
That we talk about the Shelf of Shame.
The Shelf of Shame.
Now, when we say that, I think it's worth defining. We're talking about the games in your collection that you have not played.
In other words, you feel shame because you spent money, presumably, on these games, and now they're just sitting on your shelf, and you haven't even gotten a little bit of enjoyment out of them.
Yeah.
I would be in a lot of trouble if the Shelf of Shame also include games you'd only played once. Because if I'm really striving and I'm like, oh man, this is getting out of control, I'll make sure to get a game played once. But there's a fair number of games where it's not that I don't like them. I do like them.
Yeah.
But getting to the second play is often hard, especially when you have games you haven't played yet. So, yeah, so games you haven't played once. But
and actually, the reason it's especially important to define that is because I think that there's an alternate definition of the Shelf of Shame, which is the sort of bottom right shelf of your game collection, which has this sort of pedestrian, civilian level games. That's where, I don't know, Payday and Monopoly.
Sure.
Simpsons Clue.
Mm-hmm.
They all live down there.
That's right. And, I got a copy of Boggle down there.
Oh, no, Boggle, we can talk about... Someday we'll have to talk about the games that you can buy.
Crossover games?
You know what? Maybe next week we should talk about ranking the civilian level games.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one.
Because I actually think that Boggle is up there. Back to the topic.
Right.
If you don't mind. I took a look at my collection, which actually I had just straightened out my shelves.
Nice.
So it made doing that a breeze.
Now, have you literally organized your games physically so that the games you haven't played are in one spot?
Interestingly, to me, I had a year ago, and I knocked a bunch of them off.
Oh, nice.
So now my list is relatively short. It is 12 games I haven't played.
Wow.
And 4 expansions.
So do you think, is it worthwhile to think about the Shelf of Shame as the size of the Shelf of Shame in relationship to the full shelf?
Sure, yeah.
What would your ballpark be for your full collection?
It's under 10%.
Oh, okay, nice.
Yeah. So yeah, not bad.
That's very tidy.
Yes. Did you happen to quantify this?
Yeah, I actually keep a board game geek list of my Shelf of Shame so that I can try to keep track of them. Yeah, and cry. And a significant number of the games are small games. 42. Yikes. 42. I have 42 games on my Shelf of Shame.
And do you know 42 of?
That's probably closer to 20%. I think my game collection just crested 200 in the last month or so. Yeah, that's higher than I would like, but we'll talk about why some of those games are there.
Sure. I guess maybe we should talk about that now.
Mm-hmm. So first, how long do you think, after you buy a game, I mean, unless you're awesome, unless you're living a more awesome life than I am, you can't come home and play the game you bought the night you buy it.
Uh-huh.
So how long do you have a game before you would consider it deserving to be part of the Shelf of Shame as opposed to just that new game you got?
Me, personally, it's on your Shelf of Shame the minute it walks in the door.
Oh, okay.
0 to shame instantly.
Nice.
That is sort of an insight into how I look at the world on some level, I think.
Okay.
Yes,
if you aren't helping Rob immediately, you're dead to him.
Amen.
I think for me, it's about a month. If I have a game for a month and I haven't played it yet, then I put it on my Shelf of Shame, or I think of it as a game that I bought and haven't played, as opposed to I just got this game.
Currently, my collection is organized such that the games are somewhat thematically grouped, and then a sort of Tetris-esque distribution to fit the available space more or less.
Sure.
So there isn't actually a physical shelf of shame. So it's a spiritual shelf. It's a shelf in my heart.
Some people, I think, do a stack of shame. They stack the games they want to play up in a sort of a spot. So you're like, oh, this is the game I want to play. Yeah, no, I don't have my games organized by whether I've played them or not. It's also sort of optimizing space and putting games in the same size box in the same shelf so they fit nicely.
Can I, I'm going to ask as though I'm not going to go ahead and just do it, but can I tell you that actually that list is wrong? I have a game that dropped off of my shelf of shame, and I didn't play it.
How'd that happen?
So my sister-in-law, who she asked to borrow a couple of games. She was going out of town to visit some friends, so she took Ticket to Ride, which she knows how to play, and she took Quirkle.
Okay.
And one of the friends liked Quirkle so much that she just gave them my copy of Quirkle. So I hadn't played my copy of Quirkle, and it's not on my shelf anymore.
Oh, yeah. And that is a viable way to reduce your shelf of shame, is to get rid of the games that are on it. And in preparing for this, we certainly encounter people who are like, that's one of the ways maybe a game shouldn't be in your collection is if it's been in the shelf of shame for a long time.
Reddit user Sean P. Daddy answered. I asked about this very topic on Reddit and got some great responses, including one from the aforementioned Sean P. Daddy, who said that he's got a ton of games on his shelf of shame, but it's because one of his friends has a huge collection of games and just offloaded a bunch onto this Sean character, which just instantly created a huge shame load.
See, that's why you need a buffer. I think you get a month to be like, this is a new game we just got. There's no shame in having not. So, I think of the shelf of shame. I mean, one of the ways to see it, it's a shame because, again, you've acquired this thing and you haven't used it. But I think you have a window in which it's not shameful that you haven't used it. You're not obligated immediately to play it. So I think, I guess Sean doesn't say how long they've had these games, so maybe they got them, years ago.
Well, yes, you're a soft man, as we've discussed before. Mm-hmm. So there's a way, and actually that leads us to, as we're subdividing, like, why are things on your shelf of shame? Mm-hmm. One of the reasons is gifts.
Oh, sure.
And that's actually a significant number of the games on my list were gifts.
Okay. Well, give me a couple.
The meta game. I don't know anything about that game. I keep a spreadsheet of my games, and it's on there, and I linked. It's got an okay rating on Board Game Geek.
Nice,
better than I would have guessed. Do
you think that rating the game on Board Game Geek is one of the things you do when you're playing the meta game? And that would be some awesome game designer mojo there.
That would be pretty sweet.
Get people to go rate your game on Board Game Geek while they're playing your game, and then more people buy your game because they've been rating the game. Ooh.
We're going to have to implement that.
That's right. We'll call our game the meta game.
Nice. 221 B. Baker Street, Time Travel.
Ooh.
So this is a Sherlock Holmes, H.G. Wells crossover game.
That's pretty sweet.
It is. The reason I haven't played it is, boy, that board looks like Trivial Pursuit.
Oh.
It looks like a slightly dressed up.
Maybe it's a map of a TARDIS.
Could be. Another one, The Masons, which I hear it's a pretty good light game, but I didn't buy it.
Okay.
And then, interestingly to me...
Now,
yeah, go.
Masons, like people who build buildings?
The Masons, M-A-Z-I-N-S.
Oh, okay.
So it's a play on amazing.
Got it.
But maze.
Got it.
And amazing. The Masons. Also, a couple of years ago, I think 2 Christmases ago, my wife decided she'd buy me Settlers of Catan because I don't have that in my collection.
Right.
And instead, she bought me the Catan 5 and 6 player expansion. And then,
well, okay. For if you're ever invited to a party where they're playing Catan already, but you're the 5th or 6th player,
as I mentioned on Reddit in the thread about this question of shelf of shame, my wife is not a gamer, so I think she just didn't know. It said Catan, and it looked like Catan, so she bought it.
Sure.
So then this year she bought me Settlers of Catan, and I just haven't gotten around to playing it yet. So those two gifts are in both my expansion section and my game section.
Well, that's pretty good. There are a couple games in my Shelf of Shame that are gifts that a couple of them were gifts that came as part of math trades or as part of trades.
Okay.
That I have a couple card games where I was making a trade for something. I don't quite recall what. And the person who was trading with me said, hey, I'm just going to chuck a couple small games in. One of them is a fighting game of some sort called Tessen, which seems to be like a card game version of Street Fighter, I think.
Huh.
It looks kind of neat, and it's fairly well rated. I just have never gotten around to play it. And then there's an Alan Moon game, and I can't find the name of it right now. But it's an Alan Moon card game, something about a canal. That again, it's just I haven't gotten around to playing it. So I've had a couple of those, and then I have a couple games that, were given to me. There was one year for my birthday. My wife, this was back before I was a hobby gamer. Really, she did some research and bought me some games, and a couple of those games we never got played, and they're still in my collection because I've never bothered to get rid of them.
I think that's sort of the least shameful rung,
right,
on this,
because you didn't. If you have a gift you haven't played, you didn't actively go out and acquire that. So you didn't spend your money, say, hey, this is something I want, and then I'm not doing anything with it.
Well, and I think that's sort of where it's like, my wife likes to collect pieces of blue glass, and then people notice she's collecting blue glass, and then they start buying her blue glass.
Right.
But those aren't, they're doing it wrong. So sometimes people get you a great gift that you love, and that's wonderful. And sometimes people get something that's through no fault of their own, a little outside of your wheelhouse.
Sure.
I think probably the most common and heart-wrenching occupants of the Shelf of Shame are the games that you bought and you're excited about, but you haven't been able to play them. And there are probably a couple subcategories of that.
Right.
For example, your group of gamers, that's not their style.
Sure. Would you see it as a separate one that there might be people in your group of gamers that would like to play it, but your group of gamers, you don't have time? Is there a distinction between you don't have anyone to play it with because they wouldn't like it, and you just can't figure out how to make the time to play it?
Well,
or do you see those as the same category?
They're similar. I think the one where it's just like, I'd rather not play that.
Sure.
Is the big one. We talked briefly about the Doom, DOOM,
right,
board game that was remade into Descent.
Mm-hmm.
And when we sat down to play that, I asked my brother who owned it, is this going to be more or less fun than playing Canasta? And he said, it's going to be less fun. and so probably one of the reasons I didn't love that game is because I was sitting there thinking, well, we could just be playing Canasta. But he really wanted to play it.
Right.
So, I mean, that was liberating something from his Shelf of Shame, which, I'm noble for doing that for him, taking that bullet.
Well, it's interesting. The way that you're framing that sort of sounds like you have a game that you'd like to play, and you ask your group, and they're like, no, we don't want to. I tend to do a lot of self-censoring that way. That there's a number of games on my Shelf of Shame that I would really enjoy playing, but either they take a long time or they're the kind of game where to learn it, really, you need to read the rule book yourself. And so if we're going to play it, there's a lot of orchestrating of things. Yeah. So, I think, for instance, if I can jump to specific examples, if that's okay.
By all means.
One of the games on my Shelf of Shame is the Martin Wallace sort of famously weird and possibly disastrous game, Moonga Invaders from Outer Space. Mad scientists and atomic monsters attack the Earth. And I've heard a number of reviews that suggest it's actually pretty amusing. And it's definitely in my wheelhouse. The theme is great. You know how much I like Martin Wallace games. But the rule book is really complicated. It's from Treehouse Games, which was his in-house company, and he was not very good at editing the rule books for those games. I've found the Study in Emerald game book is equally kind of maddening, as much as I love that game.
Well, at least there it's on theme.
For sure. So Moonga Invaders is one of those games that I've bought. I've read the rules a couple different times, but I've never found a time when I'm like, okay, I want to spend a half hour teaching this and then have a group of 3 or 4 people play it. So it's it's been there for a while.
I've had this experience with some of the deeper Rattlebox games.
Oh, right.
Excuse my mispronunciation, my definite mispronunciation of his name. But it took at least 2 attempts to play Dungeon Lords and 2 or 3 to actually play a game of Mage Knight.
Right. And,
so,
I mean, for me, this isn't on my shelf of shame because I've played it a few times. Dungeon Pets is one of my favorites. And Avery really likes that too, and we still can't ever play it. We just never have time.
Yeah, well, so it was a real act of will, and I burned some points, some cred with my like. Okay, we're gonna sit down, and we're eating our vegetables because this is
right. Well, I mean, I really like Dungeon Lords. When
it's a great game, but you're talking about the threshold of learning,
right?
And going from not knowing to teaching people that game. That was
there's
rough.
a lot of prep.
Mage Knight, it was just me and our friend Mario, and I mean we like
Mario
grit and determination is the only thing that got us through that. And Mario, he came over and it was like we were on a mission. We're going to play this game to completion. It took us probably 5 to 7 hours to play the easy beginning setup.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was it fun?
It was. And it would be more so, I mean, I think it would be fun to play with 4 players. And now that we have some familiarity, and actually, perhaps interestingly, for you people with your own shelves of shame, those were both games that were at the same time on my shelf. Actually, I bought both of those off Craigslist. I wonder if that's how they came to me from someone else's shelf of shame.
Sure.
Learning Dungeon Lords, I really think helped me play Mage Knight because I was a little more in his head.
Sure.
And those games are not in any obvious way in the same world. As a matter of fact, they're almost certainly not in the same world because one's like super tongue-in-cheek and another is like just serious.
Right.
But, starting to understand how he thinks about injuries and the way he sets up a turn, like it was definitely helpful.
For sure.
So maybe think of if you've got a couple titles by the same guy or gal on your shelf.
I got
do a run.
2 Martin Wallace games on my shelf.
There you go.
Yeah.
And I think those are the first ones that I had learned myself. He's such a wide-ranging designer.
Really?
That some of his games offer no window into his design aesthetic, but these 2 were nice.
Right. So there's another game that I've been putting off because just the stories of it are about how hard to teach it is, which is I was a Kickstarter on the mega hit from the summer, Vast the Crystal Caverns, which is a game where each player plays a different role and you're all playing different games. Like the mechanisms you're using are different. And the idea is that there's a cave and there's treasure in there. One person's a knight and they're trying to find and kill the dragon. The dragon is trying to escape from the cave. The goblins are trying to find gold and kill the knight.
And now here's where it gets weird, folks. I know the next roll. Go on.
And then one person is the evil cave trying to kill everybody. And I have been tracking this game. I was watching it when it was in a works in progress thread on Board Game Geek. Like I've literally been tracking this game for like 2.5 years. I was part of the conversation about it. I was one of the first Kickstarter backers. I was all in. I was super excited. It showed up while we were traveling this summer, and I got home and I started hearing all these podcasters talking about how it was really neat, but it was just brutal to teach. And I just kind of kept putting it off. And then he did a Kickstarter for the second edition, which included like an upgrade pack with like more streamlined rules and stuff.
No.
And so, he did a second edition. It has models and all this other junk that I didn't want to pay for. To go all in on that would have been another $60 or something. So, but he did it was like not bad, like $10. You got the new rule set and new player cards that are supposed to be a bit easier to use. So now I've been putting off playing it because I know that I have an easier to use rule set arriving sometime in the summer.
That totally bums me out because, I mean, that's going back to a previous conversation. So he like full on admits there, I've released a broken game.
Or the rules could be, could be better.
If you're releasing a whole new set of rules and new cards, player cards,
right?
anyway.
Yeah. So, I mean,
That's a bummer.
Well, it's also a reprint. Like, he sold out. So, I mean,
Well, yeah.
you would, I don't begrudge a designer using the fact that you're doing a reprint as a way to like, okay, well, we can streamline these rules.
Okay. I now charge you with the task. When those rules come, I want you to do a side-by-side comparison.
Okay.
And report back and see if it is sort of a forgivable tweak or if it's a like ground up.
Yeah, they really should.
Whoopsie doo.
Okay.
So
I will check.
Okay.
And we'll get back to you somewhere around episode 20.
There you go. Another way of keeping things locked up on your shelf that I was noticing in my list would be the number of players. Another example could be, we're talking about the Resistance.
Right.
5 players minimum
For sure.
to play that game. That's a threshold.
Yeah. One of the reasons I've put off buying one of my favorite party games, Two Rooms and a Boom, is that it's really hard to play unless you have like 15 people or something. So that's not a game I'm going to get to play much. One of the games on my shelf that leads to maybe another category would be event games. Games where, like, Mage Knight that you talked about, you and Mario went into that with a mission, right?
That we did.
To play it. And there are a couple games, the one for me that is currently on my shelf of shame that is an event game is Twilight Imperium 3. Right?
Yeah.
I suspect a significant percentage of the purchased copies of Twilight Imperium 3 have never been played.
I'm sure that's true.
And I bought mine more than a year ago because a friend found a used copy. No, it wasn't used. Found a copy like on the discount shelf at a game store. He called me. He's like, I know you've been looking for this. It's $50. And I'm like, that retails for $100. Yes. Pick it up for me.
There you go.
And I got it home and I took out the rule book. The rule book is a book. Like, it's the size of a graphic novel. Like,
yeah.
Probably 40 to 50 pages. I spent a couple hours twisting all the little plastic ships off of their sprues.
Yeah.
And putting them in plastic bags. And then put all the stuff back in the box, and I have not opened it since. In part because all the things I hear are that it's best to play that game at a high player count, and it takes forever.
Sure.
Like, it's a full day.
I have been to our friend Scott Bogan of the Board Game Show.
Friend of the show.
Friend of the show. Good friend of the show. Oh, Scott used to have a 2-day gaming event at his house, and he would have games of Twilight, and those would just sort of be all day. He'd do it in his attached heated garage so that they could sort of be off themselves, working through their demons there.
Sure. But even games that aren't 8 hours, there is still a threshold. And for me, it's a game that's going to run more than about 2 to 2.5.
Sure.
And
that can actually span over into the doesn't fit with the game style of your gamers. So my good buddy Matt, he just doesn't like a game that goes more than 2 hours.
Right.
Just like that goes into sort of grinding. The only game I'll get him to willingly play that is that long is the Game of Thrones board game.
Uh-huh.
And I think maybe that is because the way I always think of that is, what if someone made Risk but it was good?
Yeah.
And he likes Risk.
Okay.
So once, they got the hook in and then they set it with,
sure.
Now there's a good version of Risk.
So do you think this is a little aside from our shelf of shame, but do you think if you were to invest in some more dudes on a map game like Cyclades or Kemet or Blood Rage, that you might be able to get him to although Blood Rage is supposed to only take an hour, but some of those other games that take a long time, but tap into that same vein.
It's possible. He was also a big fan of HeroScape in its day, so it's possible. It takes a little doing to get him to play, for example, Battlestar Galactica.
Right.
It's too long. I think a way, I don't know, maybe this should be the last way that we talk about. I think one of the ways to get a game on your shelf of shame is to love the game, to buy the game, but to play someone else's copy at their house all the time.
Good one.
Because there are a couple games on my shelf that fall into that, where I don't have to play my copy, because when I'm playing it, I'm somewhere where there's already a copy.
What do you have any particular in mind that fit that category for you?
Catan. I've never played my copy of Catan still.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly, in our Tuesday night game nights, We've never played a Catan game. We've never played a Carcassonne game.
Do you have Carcassonne?
I have the big box.
Oh.
And I also have Carcassonne, the big box. So that's all the expansions, more or less.
Sure.
I have Catan and the 5-6 player expansion, and I have Catan the card game, and I have Carcassonne Castle, which is a 2-player.
We've played that. That was pretty fun.
Yeah, I really like that game.
So the one thing to think about with regard to how people acquire games, and this maybe is a subject for another conversation, but I will have to really, really like a game in order to buy it if I know somebody who has it already.
Sure.
So for instance, I enjoy Seven Wonders quite a bit, but I have not bought it because you have it.
Yeah. I think Marty, who was with us last week, that's the way he feels about Last Night on Earth.
Ah, yeah. Well, yeah, why would anybody who knows you buy Last Night on Earth?
Yeah. Although I have to say I'd be slightly more reticent to loan out Last Night on Earth just because my collection is fussily packaged.
Right. Well, then they'd have to rent a U-Haul to borrow it.
Although what I'd probably do is give them the original core set, which I, as I've mentioned before, have that all by itself.
Right.
So, before we leave the topic, I, for funsies, went on the Twitters and I asked people to enumerate their shelf of shame. Tell us how many games they had on their shelf.
What's interesting is, does that become a kind of bragging opportunity? Or, do we brag about how many are on their shelf, or are we actually ashamed?
You don't in a Twitter poll, because in a Twitter poll, it is anonymous.
Oh, fair enough.
So most of the people, or a plurality, had between 1 and 10.
Okay.
And then the least had between 11 and 20, which is where I am. Mm-hmm. I did not respond. And then we're tied for the most between 21 and 30 games and 30 or more.
Which is where I am.
And I assume you didn't respond.
I did not.
So that was interesting to me. And then, is there anyone else we want to shout out on Reddit? Because we got a lot of great responses on Reddit to this question. Someone else who said that they did a math trade.
Wow, one person here, Medwind, has certainly fallen down the I'm buying a big collection hole. Probably over 100 left to play.
Oh my
When I get around to them, I'll play them. Only so much time per gaming session, smiley face.
Wow.
So that actually speaks to not only having a significant acquisition habit, which is fine. If you can afford it, that's great.
Oh, yeah.
But also having enough room. Like having room to have 100 games you haven't played.
Yeah.
Because presumably, maybe this is a one and done kind of player. He plays a game and then trades it away. After a single play or something, but still. I'm
not seeing a lot of repeats. I asked people if they wanted to shout out any specific games, although War of the Ring shows up a couple of times.
I saw several people have Forbidden Stars, which would fall into a big game that you have to kind of plan for category.
Yeah. Twilight Imperium 3 does show up a couple times too. I have to say, and thank you to everyone who responded. In my heart, my favorite response comes from Admar123, who says, "More than my wife thinks." Too true, my friend. Too true. So actually, I'd say go over and check out, there's some great responses and some nice thinking going on in that Reddit chain.
For sure. I'll put a link to that in the show notes.
And I have to say, Reddit's scary to me. Reddit was scary. I'm a dude in his 40s, and I hadn't really done Reddit until a few months ago. My interactions with people in the D&D subreddit have been great. My interactions with people in the board game subreddit have been great.
Sure. I found the Netrunner subreddit to be quite enjoyable.
I think that we can safely say that is a discussion of the shelf of shame.
So before we wrap that up, I did want to mention on the podcast of Nonsensical Gamers, they had a conversation about their shelf of shame.
Imaginary friends of the show.
Right, for sure. And I'm hoping to meet some of them at Origins, so hopefully real friends of the show eventually. But they have, on occasion, referred to their shelf of shame as a shelf of opportunity. And that's a phrase I've been trying to use more because sometimes, especially if you're paying attention to the hobby, often a lot of the board game media is about the flashy new thing and wanting to play new stuff and get this new game and get that new game and new. And we forget to look back at the things maybe that we've already bought and that are sitting on our shelf. And as soon as you pick it up, like every time I look at the box for Moonga Invaders, I'm excited to play that game. It's like the pieces are orange and purple. It's crazy. It looks great. But so, taking the opportunity that you've already built for yourself to play those games.
Totally. I guess the penultimate thing I'll say on this topic is the way I've gotten down to 12 or 14 games or however many you want to count me as being at is A, focusing on playing the games that were on that list for a year. And B, I basically was in a purchasing moratorium because I was way out of whack.
Right.
So I did slow down my purchasing. The last thing we'll say on this topic, Rob says unilaterally, is if today you could go and play one game, pull it off your shelf, cross it off your list, what would that be? Who would you liberate?
Well, it's actually one that's barely even been on the shelf long enough to qualify. I've only had it a little over a month, but it would be The Arrival, which is a Martin Wallace game that came out last year at Gen Con, but only in Europe. So it's really hard to get a hold of. And I was given a copy, which is super nice. Actually by Patrick of the Blue Peg Pink Peg podcast. Out of nowhere, he said, "Hey, did you ever get that game?" I said no, and he mailed it to me.
Wow.
What a prince.
That's great.
And I haven't gotten to play it yet because, again, it's Martin Wallace games always have at least one mechanism that's just a little off. And so I've read the rules several times. I think I could teach it now, but I have yet to take it to a place where I would think that people would be amenable to it and enjoy it. I know it's not a game my wife would enjoy, so I haven't introduced it during the home game time.
I think for me, it would probably be Mice and Mystics. I just have to reread the rules and sit down with the right subgroup of my gamers, whether that's from in my family or from in my game group.
Well, when you do, be sure to go on Board Game Geek and download the quick reference card I made for that.
Perhaps I shall. My printer's even working. All right. Well, that is that. And boy, we'd love to hear from you about what's on your shelf of shame, why it's on your shelf of shame, what you'd like to get off of your shelf of shame, what we missed in our discussion of shelf of shame. And I think we gave you the 3 places to find us. We're always Rattlebox Games, and I'd say feel free to find us on Twitter. You can hit us up on Facebook, email us, podcast@rattleboxgames.com, or go over to Reddit. We'll be really nice. We're really nice. We're so nice. And then I think that's going to bring us to recommendations. I think we should roll a different die.
Okay.
We've been going a little long, so I see you've picked up the four-sider.
Yeah, the little pyramid, the foot stabber.
There you go. Yes.
Here we go.
Caltrop.
And we got
One.
A 1.
Hachimachi.
It's going to be quick. All right, Rob, I will pass the torch to you first.
So I listen to a lot of podcasts all day, every day, almost. Recently, I heard someone talking about the BBC iPlayer app, which used to be something that was locked. You could only get access to these radio programs if you were in the UK, but now they've made it an app. It's on both Android and Apple phones, and not only can you get shows that they don't put out podcasts of, but you can get shows that are extended versions that they do have podcasts. So it's your turn, go.
Nice. So I had 2 to recommend quickly. The first referred to, we talked about when you get a present from somebody and it's something they intend for you to like they give you a game, but they don't know that it's not a good game.
Sure. And
you have to pretend you like it anyway. When you do that, think of the Garfunkel and Oates song, Present Face, which is about pretending you like it. And if you get a chance in the Chicago area, go to Palatine and visit Toggle Gaming at Dirty Nelly's on Tuesday night.
Oh, boom. Good job. Usually, and I'm gonna apologize, friends, because usually you get to listen to us say, "Oh my gosh, what are we going to talk about next week?" But we stumbled into our conversation for next time. So we're going to be talking about sort of rating the non-hobby games. In my mind, these are sort of the games that you can buy at Target.
Right, that aren't in the strategy games shelf, because Target now does have a pretty decent selection of...
They've definitely upped their game.
Right, so the games maybe that you could get at Target 5 years ago.
Sure. So, AKA, these are mostly games from, like, the 80s and before.
Right.
before the hobby gaming revolution.
So we're going to talk about which ones are worthwhile.
Well, yeah, maybe do a little ranking.
Okay.
I'd really love to hear from you guys about that.
Oh, you spent a minute talking about that, dumb timer.
I would love to hear from you guys about that. Maybe games that you love or hate that are on that list, and your thoughts about any of those.
For sure.
And once again, same place, hit us up there. I think that's going to do it for us today. As we mentioned earlier, please subscribe, rate, and review. It really helps us out, both from a listener perspective and from an emotional health perspective.
And if you get a chance, check out one of our other podcasts. We've got Matter of Drag, which is a live play D&D podcast starring Rob and a couple other, Marty, who you've heard here before, Ben, and Mario, who we mentioned today as a fan of Mage Knight.
There you go. Yes. And then there's, of course, Install from Heap, which is Brendan's Netrunner podcast.
Actually, in the next few months, the Legacy expansion for Netrunner Terminal Directive is coming out. And I think Avery and I will play our way through that and talk about it.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks for listening, guys. And we'll be back at you in 2 weeks. Hope that all goes well for you between now and then.
Bye-bye.
The Matter of Drag Dungeons & Dragons podcast recounts the adventures and misadventures of 3 reasonably brave and fairly heroic friends through the fantastic mystical kingdom of Drag. Tune in every other week to follow Raven the Cleric, Bernard the Warlock, Lorne the Rogue, and Rob the Dungeon Master as they stumble toward greatness. Huzzah! Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.